This is where you intro the show. Because now we're recording.
No, start it over. You can restart the recording.
No, I'm not starting it over. This is
literally click stop recording,
Yeah, okay.
and then click another one, and you
Okay.
will know the file that has 5 seconds is not the one to use, and the
Yeah.
file that has 45 minutes is the one you
Yeah,
use.
this is called content. All right, here we go. Ready? All right, I'm going to do it again.
Don't you give me that cute little finger this time. Hey, welcome to the podcast where we have Plyrock and we have Joshua, and I forgot your last name. What is your last name? Introduce yourself, as a matter of fact.
Hey, I'm Josh Hutt, and currently a doctoral candidate at Liberty University right now.
Nice to meet you, Josh.
He's I met him through I guess a mutual professor. That's like one of his readers of his dissertation, and he was a reader on mine, and we had similar topics, and so he told us to get together and discuss the gaming topics that we were both studying. And but anyway, and I just, in my brain, you're always been Josh, and I was like, you know what, I probably should have memorized his last name too, because I knew you were Joshua the whole time. But
you're good.
but yeah, anyway, he's looking into some really interesting data on how the gamers use gaming, specifically MMORPGs, I believe. And anyway, I don't want to take his steam. So Joshua, why don't you introduce what you're researching and what it's, how it impacts us?
Sure, yeah. So I'm currently working on getting my dissertation to get the degree of communications, and I'm currently studying communications as they happen in MMORPGs. So I'm looking at it from a theory called Uses and Gratifications theory, which basically states that people are going to use certain types of media to fulfill specific needs. And so what I've decided to look into is, how are players using communication in MMORPGs, and, are they aware, or why do they choose to do it in that way, especially with all the different options that we have of how to communicate today in 2025. They've got tons of options. They've got tons of games to play. What's motivating them to gravitate towards that specific type of connection and relationship in those games?
Excellent. And so also if you go and you listen to I believe it's the third podcast. When was the time that I did my solo podcast, Ply? Was it the third or fourth podcast?
I think it was the fourth and the sixth.
Okay, the fourth. So the fourth one, I also slightly discussed uses and gratification. I talked about the 4 theories that we kind of talked about behind the scenes. And so I was just saying, in case they want to, they can go back and get, I did a pretty good, I guess, academic breakdown of it as well there. So if you want more content on top of what we're doing here, you can, go back and get a good listen there. But yeah, so what did you discover? Like, what do you think is making gamers or inspiring gamers to use MMOs to communicate with other people and create emotional connections?
So there's a lot of things that I've had to kind of sift through when it comes to all the research out there and everything, especially because for me, I'm trying to narrow down which MMOs I'm going to end up studying and things like that. Still in the early phases of kind of like proposing my topic and kind of getting all of the pieces ready to set up before I start collecting a lot of future data. But a lot of the research that I'm looking at now, it sometimes does depend on the actual game. Like, there are certain games that are going to have certain pulls for like the fantasy and things like that. Like, not everyone's going to be interested in Final Fantasy 14, even though it's a popular title. Some people are going to kind of, the way it looks or the way that plays isn't necessarily for me. And as we started to look through it, it became, I think, a little bit more. It became less and less about the game itself, and I started seeing a pattern more and more of it really seems to be what people are trying to get out of the experience of playing together. I think today, a lot of the newer generations and things like that, they see games as a whole as a new social activity. It's no longer mindless entertainment that you kind of turn your brain off of and stuff like that. For a lot of these players, it's the way that they can connect to their friends, their family, and even make new friends, and things like that. It's that really, I think, is at the crux of what I'm trying to study and say, okay, so a lot of games out there can give you those types of connections. It's not just MMORPGs. There are people that make relations through Call of Duty. There are people that make relationships through some real-time strategy games and things like that. Like there's a lot of different types of games out there that you can build these relationships with. So really my thing is, what is the specific use, or what is the specific need that's driving people to MMORPGs? And from what I've seen there, one of the biggest things is that sense of community, that sense of like collaboration and cooperation. Like a lot of these players love the sense of adventure. Like if you've seen Lord of the Rings, like they're big fellowship people. Like where's my group of 9 that we can just travel across mountains and slay a dragon or bring something up there. And I think it's that experience that I believe is at the core of what pulls a lot of people towards these types of games, to make those types of relationships. Like it's not so much about the destination, but the journey and the people that you get to make that journey with.
Yeah, I would just, based upon what you just touched on, like if you look at just anecdotally, from the memories I have playing Call of Duty and doing those other multiplayer things with friends and everything, it's more like that's more of a sense of like camaraderie, let's kick their ass, other things like that. But when I did play, like we were talking about earlier before we came on studio here, I had said the one MMO I spent so much time in was DC Universe Online, and it became like that sense of adventure and fellowship. And we even used that word without even thinking about using that word, fellowship, to explore whatever Metropolis, Gotham, wherever I was, and it wasn't about the conquering of something else. It was more about, hey, how are your kids doing? What's going on over? Then all of a sudden we're checking in with each other every day, and we're sending pictures back and forth, and it just was. I get what you're saying. Like it's a different vibe. Is I guess the right preach? Would you agree that it's kind of? You get into Call of Duty, or you get into even Fortnite. I watch my little one play Fortnite. He's jumping up and down. Let's kick their ass. Let's do this. Well, he's better not say ass, but he started jumping up and down, and he's he's all into that battle aspect of it with his friends, which is great. So I'm not knocking that. But if he's gonna sit down and play New World or Final Fantasy 14, he's not gonna be jumping up and down and going crazy like that. Like getting the. It's more of like just hanging out with his buddies. Like it's more, right? What do you think, Preach?
I'm interested. I wonder about you were saying that, and the more I thought about it, I wonder if it's just a different sense of adventure, because I feel like you're trying. I like when I play Call of Duty with friends, and especially like say
you get sweaty as hell.
I do.
I've played with you. You get sweaty.
Yes, because we are. It is an event. We are trying to accomplish a goal, and so it's like we have to work together. I mean, anytime you watch, let's just use Tim the Tap Man as an example, because he's a big name, right? Like you see them yell at each other, but it's because they're all trying to achieve a certain goal. So there is that like community, and then they laugh about it, and like in between rounds, you get a little more. It's like. It's almost like you're fighting the orcs more. Does that make sense? Like if there's less on our little trip eating the lambus bread or lamas or whatever it's called.
Fourth breakfast.
Fourth breakfast. There's a little less of that, and it's more like Call of Duty is like
it's intense.
Little breaks with more orc fighting, whereas it feels like MMOs, the balance of orc fighting to potato eating is is a little more even. So maybe in that, I don't know that like the intent is different, but it may be the personality type. So there's people who are very driven to do, and so they feel a tighter bond with it. They will actually feel the bond. That's how they get that sense of bonding through competition, through going to war with your brothers. And then we went on an adventure.
Sparta.
Where, and so I don't know if like the core motivation is different, but I do think maybe the way in which it manifests is different depending on the person. And so, because like, I play all the above, and so I can get, different. And I know people who get super sweaty on MMOs because they, like
Leroy Jenkins.
Yeah,
that's exactly it. Like, I have a friend who's like, he gets kind of frustrated if people don't follow the game the boss mechanisms just right, and then they die and they have to do it over again. He's like, I just can't believe they're so dumb. They can't see it's on the ground. It's a red spot on the ground. It's like, settle down a little bit.
Yeah, that's not.
So
me.
yeah, I mean, I think you get the sweats in no matter what game you go into, and you get the like, I'm just here to have a good time no matter the game. Like Clyde playing Call of Duty, he's just there to have a good time and die, and then we have to revive him, and
So full of shit. So you, Josh, you focused in on World of Warcraft. You were saying earlier. So is that what you chose to like for your dissertation? Did you choose? All right, I'm going to focus on WoW, and because there are so many.
So that's actually one of the biggest things that has been happening with my dissertation is I definitely, and I think Preach will be the first person to second this, is you always have this big idea of like, I'm going to address all the things. And, I'd love to know everything about every MMORPG and every player base. And then you realize by the time you've collected enough data to say something definitively about one game, you're 2 years older.
That's exactly.
Like, I'm done. So a lot of what I've done is kind of to downsize to make sure that I've got the time and the energy to collect everything. But World of Warcraft's the one that I chose. I mean, for one, because of the popularity. I mean, it's still a big name, despite all of the ups that it had and the downs it has experienced along the way.
It's the big boy. It's the Walmart of MMOs. It's just
love it or hate it, it's taken the most punches and it's somehow still in the ring. Like it's still there. So that's one of the reasons that I've chosen that one. I also like that it also that seems to be the MMO that, in my opinion, also kind of did its best to balance everything. And what I mean by balance is there's still a lot of choices in that game for people. And I think a lot of MMOs have picked it up from now, but kind of what Preach was saying, you do have some competitive people that are there for specifically like PvP servers. Like, I'm going to build this character and then I'm going to hunt some other people out there and prove that I'm the best, one-on-one duels or fighting with your team or whatever. But then you also you have the potato, eating the potatoes by a campfire on the side of the road there, and just being there for more of the vibe. I think a few of the other MMOs, they've incorporated those things, but I think once again, WoW, just from being there the longest, has kind of like a balance of all of those things where, you've got the hardcore raiders, but you also have the people that they're just there to level, and as soon as that character hits max level, they go right back to the character creation and they're back at it again.
That's crazy. I would say it's probably the smartest one to do, because if you go on the street and you say to somebody the word MMO, who's any type of gamer or knows about gaming, first thing they're going to think of is World of Warcraft.
Yeah.
It's just that's the image of Cartman at his computer in South Park.
Yeah.
That's the image of whatever it is. You're going to go right to World of Warcraft and be like, that's an MMO. Even though Final Fantasy XIV plays nothing like World of Warcraft. Action RPG, or all the DC Universe Online was basically a fighting game RPG. So a MMO RPG. So, but yeah, WoW's the point and click. Sit there and I don't know when are they going to add controller support? What's wrong with them? But they have the. So, but I think that's a good call. I think it's got the biggest player base for you. And it's got 20 years in the business plus, right? And there's how many different servers now? There's the vanilla server from the original game. There's the new one. They got a new expansion coming, a 3-part series, I think.
Yeah,
is coming out.
War Within, and all the hardcore servers now with Classic and Season of Discovery, everything else in between. They're trying to bring in everybody past present in order to drive some kind of future engagement there.
So is this in World of Warcraft? Do you have experience with World of Warcraft, like as a gamer, or is this something you started to learn as you did your dissertation?
So yeah, for me that was the game that kind of pulled me into MMOs was World of Warcraft. Now
Okay.
I will say this, I came in late to the party. So I definitely came from the family that was a little bit wary of MMOs when they first came out. That parents were like, I don't know, there's just a bunch of people on the internet. I don't know if I like that you're talking to them and things
Yeah,
like
you got to
that.
take
But
a shower, do your homework. You're just gonna sit there and
exactly.
die. Yeah, the stereotypes of an MMO. Yeah.
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 And and knowing the type of kid I was in high school, that was probably a good call from my parents. I
Yeah, they're
probably
like, maybe you should have a girlfriend. I don't know. Get out there a
yeah,
little bit.
maybe.
Yeah. Yep.
But yeah, I came a little bit later to the party. The first one that I kind of jumped into would have been I think it was Mist of Pandora, which
Oh, the
a
Kung Fu
lot of
Panda
people.
one.
Yeah, that's what a lot of people are like. Oh man, that's where you came in. Like,
Yeah.
and everyone else is like, Wrath of the Lich King, Burning
Yeah.
Crusade, and they're
Yeah.
like, oh, you're one of the panda people.
Yeah. All right.
But
That's
I
funny.
I had a blast with it, and I've been playing it like a little bit more casually, and then um, picked it up a little bit later when Classic came out. That's what really hooked me. I loved Classic, and I think that's because I never experienced the original vanilla experience, but
Yeah.
how much slower it was, and like every level that your character had was kind of a badge of honor, like a certain amount of time, effort, and like
Yeah.
work that you had to put in for every piece of gear that you had and every spell that you could throw meant that, okay, like this guy has traveled around and moved around in places, and you join a guild and see some of the other people higher level than you, you're like, oh, that's where I want to get to. That kind of aspirational goal there, really, that's what really hooked me.
Okay. Do you have social connections in the? I mean, you've clearly been playing the game for a long time. Is this where you started to sense where you wanted to do your dissertation? Because you're like, man, I got a lot of friends on World of Warcraft, and
Yeah.
why do I have these friends? And why do I want to make sure they're okay on a daily basis? And why do I want to like frolic through the forest and fight this dragon with them? Is
Yeah.
that where the ideas started to come up with for your dissertation?
Yeah, originally I played Warcraft just with an immediate friend of mine that I knew in person, and
Yeah,
he was
okay.
like, "Yeah, I'm playing this. You should play it with me." And so we started it there, and then after that, after I joined a guild and things like that, started meeting a lot of people that were just like, "Hey, you need somebody to quest with, or what are you trying to do now? Oh, I'm trying to work on my crafting or something like that." They're like, oh, you should go here, this is where you can get the best materials, or
Yes.
oh, just make 700 copies of this item and it'll level you up to max or something. Like, okay, great. Best thing that I remember was when I was in Classic, I was understandably out of my element. When you go from like Mists of Pandora, Warlords of Draenor, like more modern retail WoW, and then you jump back to vanilla with no context of what that's going to be like.
Yeah.
I remember for a while being like, "Oh, like I'm broke. I have no money. I'm not used to this. I can't buy the thing that I need."
Yeah.
And that's where I really made a lot of connections with people in the guild and stuff like that. I remember this one. For the life of me, I can't remember the username now, but it was just an undead mage, and said, you need to level up in this dungeon. I said, yeah, I just can't find anybody to go with. And he was like, I'll get on my high level one, and you and me will run through it, and you just pick up everything behind me. And it was great.
Power
like,
leveled
and,
you.
Yeah, power leveled me through
That's
it. And after all of that, he's like, how much do you have left? I was like, oh, I actually leveled up enough that I can start eventually saving up for my mount. And he was like, how much do you need? And I was like, I need like 30 gold. And he just dropped it in my mailbox and said, have a nice day. And I'll see you on tomorrow. And from there, I just started meeting and helping other people out in the guild, and it was a blast. It was a lot of fun.
It's interesting because I feel like that was one of the primary things that made Final Fantasy XI also click for our communities. Is it was very slow, very difficult. You could lose levels while fighting, and then all the gear you had on you wouldn't fit anymore. So it was very slow, methodical. You had to be safe. But it also encouraged people to help each other out, because like there was things that you literally had to. I remember one time we had to basically we all took a whole night, and the whole group of like 8-10 of us went into this area, and we just started killing mobs because one of them would drop an item like once every 4 hours or something, right?
Yeah.
But it brought community because we're all doing it for someone. It forced you to kind of not be selfish. And the funny thing is, I think that's part of what you were talking about with. That's kind of how they've changed the MMOs a little bit. Is that you can kind of just play by yourself.
Yes.
And you don't have to rely on others, which I understand why. Because not everybody can make friends. Not everybody's comfortable in that situation. But I do feel like something with modern MMOs has kind of gotten lost in not being able to need the community or to be reliant on others. And it kind of breaks that, bond that you can start to develop when it's like, okay, you help me out, I'll help you out, or whatever. There is an emotional element that gets lost and a psychological element that gets lost in making the game a little too easy to do by yourself.
Right.
So yeah, I do wonder how that would play into what you're talking about, where you're looking at how the communication. I wonder if classic WoW had more of that a bonding communicate. I mean, obviously not completely different. It's not like nobody talks to each other in modern WoW versus classic.
No, yeah.
I do wonder if there is a little bit more of a shift in how people experience the communication elements and the community building elements between the two versions of the game.
Well, I can tell you real quick, just anecdotally, I remember when I went to my first MMO, I had been living in the Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 lobbies for years and games like that on PlayStation 3 and everything else. So that when I went to DCU Online and everybody was so friendly and helpful, number one, I thought I was in a cult for a second.
Yeah.
Like, yo, what's going on here? And then I couldn't believe the difference between the strangers I met over here in Call of Duty Battlefield and I mean, they knew everything about my mother I didn't know. And then over here I went to DCU, and no matter how sweaty it got with the people I met, I can only speak with my personal experience, but the people I met over here were like, oh yeah, like you had said, like, oh, you need help, go over here in Gotham, get this. No, don't worry about it. I drop you 3 of these. You can craft that. Oh, look at your cape. It's so pretty. Like, they were just... Even if they were villains, I played a hero, but even if they were villains, you'd get to... They were just like, they weren't villains.
Yeah.
Like, it was... I'm saying personally, not in the game, but they were just like, I'll help you. I'll help you. I'll help... They almost wanted to encourage... Because they didn't want the player base to go down. I think fundamentally, maybe inside a little bit, they loved the game so much and cared about it, they didn't want to see the player count drop. So they kind of collectively made this weird decision without talking about it with each other, where they were like, new people come in, we're going to help. If new people go into Call of Duty, the day after Christmas is called the day after Christmas on Call of Duty for a reason. When those little newbies get in there and Preach is laughing because he's the one headshotting and getting his KD up as fast as possible on December 26th, because he knows every little Tom, Dick, and Harry just got an Xbox or whatever it is, and they don't know how to control it, and he's popping them off left and right? Like he's on the fucking 56 parallel in Korea, and they're trying to run across. That's him. But you go into DCUO or you go into WoW, and the new kid comes in, and like you said, probably like, hey, you're new, yeah, you're level 3. They don't make fun of you. They don't laugh at you. I mean, not everybody, but I'm generalizing a little bit. But they'll come.
Sure.
Hey, you're new to the game? Oh, yeah, dude, go check this out. I'll help you. I'll run through that dungeon with you, because they don't want to lose that community. And I think they also want to fight that perception societally that gamers are like the everybody thinks that everybody acts like in the Call of Duty lobby with your mom. Like the way the nasty things that people say to each other. I think they're fighting that societally too. Like, no, when people come in here, we're kind. When people come in here, we want to help. We want the this is a positive experience. This is not a negative one. So that's just anecdotally from me, what I saw when I jumped in.
Sure. I think too, kind of bouncing off what you just said there is, I think that's one of the reasons why I like studying specifically MMORPGs is because of how open-ended they are. You kind of get to see little microcosms of human behavior. Like if you're looking for trouble in an MMO, you will find people that are more than happy to cause mayhem with you. And if you're looking to be helpful, or if you're looking for help, you're gonna find those people naturally. All you have to do is just kind of, you know, open yourself up a little bit and send something out there for what's helping, and sooner or later someone's going to come along there and walk you through it. And I think, kind of going back to what you said, Preach, about, you know, some of the differences between classic and modern, there's definitely pros and cons to both, because I think for classic, its blessing was also a little bit of its curse, where yes, there was a lot more human interaction and talking and kind of this sense of community building. And I think that was very helpful for helping people make those bonds that last and bring them back. But I think also that could have been also what was frustrating to a lot of early players of those, to be like, if you weren't someone that was willing to communicate, if you were playing this game just because it's a game and you want to just, you know, just turn your brain off and, you know, grab a beer and you know, you're just chilling in Orgrimmar or something like that. In classic WoW, eventually the game kind of punishes you for not getting involved. Like there comes a point where it's like, if you're not in a guild, or if you don't have at least 4 other people willing to work with you on this dungeon, like you're gonna start to encounter more and more hardship, and it's going to be harder to level. It's going to be harder to get the gear that you're looking for and things like that. And I think modern WoW fixed some of that and said, oh, it's no problem now. Like you can just kind of automate the dungeon and it'll match make you with 4 other people looking for the same thing, and you can get through that whole dungeon without talking to anybody. But then as a result, now you don't have the human factor bringing you back. Now the game has to stand on its own 2 feet and compete with every other game out there that you can play single player. I'm wondering if that's probably some of the trade-offs that you get from classic to modern.
Yeah, and I'm sure that's also the case with hardcore and non-hardcore too, right? Because hardcore, I mean, we saw there was actually recently this huge like fight amongst big streamers like Soda Poppin' and some of those guys, Pirate Software, and they just all, I mean, it was like drama and people were like, I'm just never even playing WoW again, all because you know, a slight miscommunication in a hardcore server during a dungeon, because, you know, that's for the sweats, I guess. It's a hardcore, you know, and so when people die in hardcore, all your stuff's gone. Like there is no comeback. And so it changes that communication, like how people, because then, I mean, you had communities literally like DDoSing each other and doing all, I mean, it was like wild how negative it got very quickly, because the difference between a casual where it's like, okay, you know, we wasted a little time, but we can get right back there, versus like your entire experience up to all the hours you put into getting your character to a point gone. And so, you know, it is interesting to see how human nature changes when there's a little I don't know, a little more on the line to lose, or a little more, you know, risk. You know, people show their colors a little more sometimes too.
Right.
Yeah. But yeah, I don't know. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's it kind of goes back to what we were talking about, Ply, before the show, about some of the fact that games force you to interact more than other types of entertainment. I think is a big pull for a lot of like MMOs and things like that. Like if you're there to do more of like a competitive or hardcore experience where it's like, this is the mountain, I'm gonna climb this, I'm gonna get through it and stuff like that, then the game goes, okay, that mountain's not going anywhere until you pick up this controller, or you get in front of that keyboard and you start moving around and you start accomplishing goals and things like that. And if you don't enjoy that experience, if you don't enjoy interacting with that world, then you just pick another mountain to climb. Like, people move on, they find something else there. Or, you know, if you're doing a more casual experience and you're just looking to level with friends, then you're gonna pick that lower hill there. But if you have no friends to interact with, you might be you have no reason to continue with that there. It's not necessarily going to be the same as like sitting around a movie with your friends, because that movie plays no matter whether you're paying attention or not. But in WoW, that game will withhold like exciting experiences from you if you choose not to participate in certain things.
I can tell you too, I just to go back a little bit too about the if those people weren't so nice to me in the MMO that I played, business wise, it made me a customer for 5 years. It hooked me in. So if they're rude to me when I go in there and they're griefing me or whatever they used to call it, blocking the doors, doing, trolling, whatever. Yeah. I don't play the game for 5 years. I move on and go find something else. But
100%.
Sony Entertainment got a lot of money out of me, even the months I didn't play it because I didn't want to lose all my shit. So I paid the $15 a month just to make sure I didn't lose my gear on the months I took a break. So 15 times 5 years of DCU Online. And that was because the initial impression when I walked into that game, besides the fact that I'm a DC fanatic, that's what got me in the door, right? So once I get in the door, then I was like, okay. And everybody was like, oh, come do this. I'll help you do that. This, do that. Oh my God, let's be friends. Let's run this dungeon together. I'm like, oh my God, I'm not used to this. It's like walking into a new church. And you're getting nervous, and you think everybody's going to judge you or stare at you, and maybe some of them are, but everybody's nice, and they're, oh, come on in, sit down, this is where the coffee is, this is what we do, this is where, it was the same thing, like when I walked into that, and I was like, they just right away, shaking hands, rubbing elbows, kissing babies when I walked into DCUO, so.
But that could be, okay, so I think that we're getting back into uses and gratification, because that's what you were looking to get gratified by. But
maybe
Call of Duty has a bazillion people that play it, right? Like they've had a drop off now because of cheaters, but
and quality.
That's a toxic. Yeah, that too. But it's a toxic community. But that's what people looked for. That's what they like. I was talking about that earlier.
Call of
like
Duty too. I was shocked at the experience. I was expecting a Call of Duty style experience when I went into DCUO.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because they did start. They started using skill-based matchmaking in Call of Duty, and that's actually part of what made people stop playing it, is because they knew that new people didn't like coming in and getting their tail handed to them and getting trash talked to them, so they tried to make it a softer, easier experience. But that's not what people who love Call of Duty want. They wanted, this is competition, this is aggression, you yell at your friends and then you hug it out afterwards. And so because of the different impersonality, it's like, that's why I think you have different games. It's because not everybody shares. I talked about this with streaming. It's the same thing. Not everybody wants the chaos that Plyrock's in. Some people want to, meditate and do their homework while Shroud talks about like this throughout the entire. Oh, we're gonna go over here.
That's what I do too. Preach, very funny.
Shoot over here to the left, and let's read this note over here. Oh, this is very interesting writing. And so it's just like people are so different in what they are seeking. That's why there is a broad spectrum of gaming. So it's not, I mean, I agree with you. I think that is an element. It's just, you have to, I feel like if you're a game maker or an entertainer or whatever, you have to choose what it is you're going to do and then nail that. Because I do think sometimes games lose what they're special at and why people play them because they try too hard to get, like, we need more customers. And then it's just like, you can't please everybody. Be the game that's good for what you're good at. And so, like, DC Universe was a good game to, pat each other on the back and hang out and be bros and drink a beer and help each other out. Whereas, like, Madden is like, one-on-one, the most toxic. It is strictly one-on-one.
Yeah.
I am doing your mom tonight.
Mortal Kombat.
Mortal Kombat, same thing. Like, there's certain industries that is just like, that is what it is. So it's just like, I think allowing people to choose what they want, but also being very honest with or being dedicated to what you're actually doing is actually the better long-term business plan, because eventually you almost don't please the people you were trying to bring in new, but you've dismissed the people that did like it in the first place. And so it's like you got to really be,
It's like bowing and apologizing to the people who demand an apology because you offended them. There's no reason to apologize to them because they're not looking for an apology, looking to crucify you. Yeah. So it's the same kind of concept. I would just say anecdotally, I didn't know what to expect when I went into my first big MMO and stayed there. And I can just tell you, based upon my behavior in video games or my behavior in the things I did, that I was pleasantly surprised, and it did suck me in. And I don't think it was the developers that necessarily made that. It was the community that they attracted that kind of morphed that into, let's help new people, let's do this, let's do that. I mean, developers gave the tools, like trade and this and that and talk and the chat rooms and stuff, but the community themselves could have been full of a bunch of, diaper-wearing jerks, but they weren't. They were... as a whole, not everybody, but there was some griefing in the beginning of DCUO, but it was more like the developers didn't program. You could not walk through another character. So I remember in the very beginning, people would there was a few people who would stand in front of the door at the police station, so you couldn't go out into the open world. So there were those people in every game. So I know we're not going down into the few bad apples and things, but. Once they patched that, you could clip through another character and just leave, so they couldn't. That was the only griefing I remember in DCUO. But I just didn't know what to expect when I went in there. I just wanted to be Superman and punch someone in the face, and it was dope because I stayed because of them. Because that game, by the way, was not good enough to hang out for 5 years. So. Yeah, and just letting you know, WoW is, because they add to it all the time. They do this, they do that. DCUO is still, to this day, I went back a few times just for memory's sake. Yeah. Still looks like it did when it was on PS3. They need a sequel. Sony doesn't run it anymore. Another company does. I think they're called Daybreak. And they add little episodes and things to it, but it still looks like it did 15 years ago. You know what I mean? So I'm not going back to it now, no matter how nice the people are. Now I'm good. I'm moved on. But boy, it sucked me in for 5 years. That's the longest I've ever played any video. Call of Duty gives me a new one every year. You get a new story, new maps, right? Madden pretends to have a new game every year, preach, right? So they use the same stadiums from each year. They don't even change the dates on the stadiums. So when you go into Madden 25, it says Madden 21 on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers Stadium. And they do all the gambling shit to hook people in with the cards and the loot boxes and everything. So there's your toxicity, with the way they do that. So
this is interesting. I would say I feel like Call of Duty and Madden are almost one game, and each actual new year is almost like a DLC of the same game. They're literally using the programming and the engine that they're using. They're building. It's still the same 10-year-old engine that was back in Call of Duty, whatever was 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. They were talking about this is why they're having such issues getting anti-cheat, and why they're having clipping and all kinds of weird performance stuff now is because they just kept piling on top of what they had, and now there's so many layers of coding going back and forth. It's almost impossible to fix anything without breaking everything. And it's so I think that's actually what you're talking about. It made me think it's people still play Call of Duty, even though it's Call of Duty War or Call of Duty 2, Call of Duty Black Ops, whatever. It's still, it's almost like one game, and it's just Mists of Pandaria or the Draenor, or it's just a different, slightly tweaked version of the same game. And you were saying with Madden, right? It really is. It's updated rosters and one new tackle mechanic that doesn't work. And it's but it is still just basically everybody wants to play one game. So it almost holds that same mentality, that same draw of being in, Call of Duty teams that were professional teams for Call of Duty 4 were the same teams that played for Call of Duty or Modern Warfare 1 were the same teams that played on Modern Warfare 2 and Black Ops, etc. It's it wasn't completely different. Oh, I can't even do the next game. So I do wonder how much that communities still stick to it because you're just getting basically a refresh. It's not a full reset of game mechanics. It's not a fully different experience. So you still kind of have the same. And I wonder how, because you were talking about this plot, how you had a chat outside the game. If you make connections inside the game, sometimes people want to make larger connections or more, detailed connections. So how does external factors like Discord, how's the development of Discord impacted MMO communication or gaming communication in general? because I remember MMOs before there was Discord, and it was, I mean, you had Ventrilo, you had one other one. I mean, like, it was very
Yeah, we were using
spread
a
out, and it's
website,
like,
and AOL
Yeah.
Instant Man. I don't even know what the hell
Exactly.
we were using.
it was like, so I wonder how that impacts a lot of the communication environment. That now it's very solidified with Discord. Like almost everybody, if you're on a computer, you use a Discord server.
Oh yeah.
You have to.
I mean, that's what we're recording.
Discord is the best communication tool in 2025. I don't care what anybody says. I don't care about Teams. Microsoft Teams is garbage. It's all garbage. Zoom made a killing when we were all sick for a few years, but that sucks. Discord is the best tool, and I'm sure for your dissertation, Josh, the level of connection over, because you started during Mr. Pandera, you said, right? Or Pandaria, what's it called?
Pandera, yeah.
Mr. Pandera, right? So you started there. That was what, 10, 12 years ago?
Yeah,
About
just
12
about
years
now.
ago? The communication and the connections with the people you met 12 years ago must be even more solidified now, and the new people coming in. You guys have systems in place to bring them in and get to know them better, right, than you did before.
100%. That's, I mean, Discord's the best place, not just for general communication of just like for the sake of clarity. Like, you know, I want to do this, but it's where you build your community now. Like now people are sharing memes. They have, you know, different chat. I mean, at this point now, especially with something as old as WoW, I mean, you have Discords for every class in the game. Like, I've never been a Death Knight before. That's okay. There's an entire Discord server of just Death Knight players sharing their builds. You know, you can get on a voice chat and talk to them for there. And I know this because
that's why I was asking.
Because that's what I did. I was a Death Knight for forever. I still have my original one from forever ago.
You're in there tweaking.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a ton of fun to be able to do that. And I think that's one of the uses that I think communication fills that gap or that gratification for certain people. It could also very well be that I'm a teacher at a small local college down here in Florida, and that's absolutely, like, I guarantee you that's part of the reason why MMOs pull me a certain way, because at some point you get enough experience and you get enough time spent in that game that you really start looking for people to kind of mentor
students
with and things. Yeah, 100%. And some of those guild officers, I'm sure, would have very similar feelings of like, that's one of the best things about it, is to bring in a new person and watch them go from, you know, this shy little person that, you know, only speaks in a couple of words in chat, and then they get a lot more. And I'm sure, like, you as a streamer, you've got a lot of that too. Like, you get those first people that come in that are brand new, and before you know it, they're talking smack and everything else.
Yeah, no, it doesn't take
with
them
the best
long.
of them.
Yeah.
Well,
it
I would say,
doesn't take them long. We steer them in the right direction as fast as we can.
Yeah.
So, but
I was gonna say, using Ply's community is great. I love, because it is very vibrant and immediately impactful. Like, it has a very distinct, like, you know how, like, okay, let's say it also helps that it's somewhat smaller, so that you get noticed immediately and people realize it's a new person, so they are willing to engage immediately. Whereas let's say Tim the Tapman, who has 30,000 people, and the scrolls just, you know, like, you could type in a brilliant joke, oh god, make everybody laugh, but no one sees it because it is on the screen for all of 0.5 seconds, right? And so it actually aids the closeness of the community, that people can actually still engage. And Ply does set it is intentional that he sets a tone of, you know, it gives the viewer a reason to interact. It gives them a platform. It entices them to, he sees someone new, don't you blah 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 blah, and then, you know, especially if he has good mods, or, you know, a good friend who knows his bullshit and will interact with him properly, they can, you know, go and be like, don't, this loudmouth goofball, don't you dare follow him. We're the real stars of this show, and then play off of them. And it actually works. Me and Ply work well because we do have different personalities, but we enjoy each other. But he can lean really far into and exaggerate this element of his personality. I'm kind of naturally a little snarky and, you know,
Yeah, you are a
digging.
little.
And so, yeah, well, okay, a lot. And so I can really lean into that during the stream and really take like shot. And Ply knows that I'm doing it for the show, and he doesn't bother him, and he knows that they're all shots of love and adoration.
I don't care what anybody says in the chat. Bring it on.
Exactly. And so and since he knows that I'm also trying to be a part of like doing that, like it works. If we can bring people in and just like immediately make them feel comfortable just to say whatever, like come in and be goofy and say what you want to say and do it. I do think that helps, like having that environment.
First Amendment.
Yeah.
Let's go for it. Yeah. Yeah, we have very few boundaries in there as a community.
Yeah.
We got a couple, but they're they're not there's not many. So yeah, people do feel hopefully people feel comfortable right away, and keep your eye on the prize. The prize is teaching me a lesson. Good luck. So that's what they do. So that Preach gets swept up in it too. So just like you're talking about, I get swept up in it, and I host the damn
I was gonna say,
thing.
I even know it's happening. It's interesting. I think I talked about this in one of the past. I know all these communication theories. I know what's going on inside my brain, but it's like I know this is happening. But I also think that's good. Like
you get
these
swept
are
up in the
environments
emotion
you're
of it.
supposed to do it. It's like a movie. Like for a horror, none of that's real. But you choose to suspend and engage it. It's not being that you're being manipulated or taken advantage of. It's that's the point. Is you're supposed to lose track of reality and get in there. So I think that's okay.
That's at the crux of what I'm studying, is that choice right there. It's the idea of like, how much of this are you actually aware of, and with that knowledge in your brain, what caused you to take that first step, that first that first time you sent a chat through, that first time that you gave somebody a hard time online and stuff. I'm sure every Call of Duty member that has been in the old chats of like the Xbox 360 lobbies and things like that, they remember the time that they finally participated. It's like that was a moment for them, baby. Yeah. And that's the stuff that's the stuff I love talking about in communication. I don't know if Preach, you remember this. This would have been, I think, one of our earlier classes that we would have had to take and stuff like that. But the book Walter Ong's like Orality and Literacy, where he basically, to give you the fastest SparkNotes version ever, because this book has been in my brain ever since the first class I took. It's essentially, a guy goes through a study of like civilization and being like, we started in like a very like oral spoken word before languages were developed. Before languages were developed, things like that. Sorry, I'll do it fast then.
No, you're good. You're good. I like it.
Yeah, we all started off at like, no written alphabet or things like that. We all did it basically just on like storytelling. Like that's how people learned. Like if you wanted to be a blacksmith, you had no choice but to sit down and listen to every single one of Grandpa's stories about blacksmithing until you were smart enough to be a blacksmith. And when Grandpa died, if you didn't learn everything, then you're just not a blacksmith, because that was your source of information. He's gone now. And, there's nothing you can do about it. Then obviously printing press gets invented, and now all of a sudden you're not tied to the stories or the community that you're a part of. Now you can pick up a book and read it, and now there's like an actual manual and sometimes illustrations, and now it can be mass produced and distributed and things like that. It's gotten to the point now where Walter Ong wrote this book. I'm blanking on like when it was published, but it was in like early 90s or something, when the internet was like still kind of like
they
a revolutionary thing.
He has done a good job. I think the ones that I read was, God, I can't remember, but it was redone. He's been updating it a bit and like because like you were saying, technology has increased so much that he felt he needed to go back and like make little tweaks and add maybe a chapter here or there. But so he has kept it up to date. But yeah, when he first made these, I think you're right. I think it was in the 90s. It was like late 90s. Like right when the internet first kicked, and you had like, chat rooms that were,
people were starting to use the internet for more than just information. It was like connections were starting to be made and stuff like that. But yeah, he's arguing now that we've actually come full circle. We went from an oral spoken word society into a literate society where we have like language and we can actually do that. He actually argues that the literate age goes all the way up into like computers, because like binary code is a written language. Like it's zeros and ones and things that drive all the codes and stuff like that. But now technology's progressed so far at this point that like reading isn't really, like, people do it, but there's a much smaller need to read things now when there's YouTube videos that can teach you everything that you want because someone's telling you the story. So he's arguing that we're actually starting to make a full circle back to
interesting,
like a completely oral society again, of like, it's now no longer necessary to have to read everything in order to get the knowledge that you need. You have people that actually have like how-to videos and things like that, and they'll walk you through it just like Grandpa did in ancient Greece of how to be a blacksmith. You don't need to read a book on blacksmithing anymore. You just need to follow so-and-so 987 at YouTube, and he'll teach you everything and walk you through it just like they did back then. It's crazy. But
correct me if I wanted to ask you this because you might actually remember this. Doesn't he also present it may have been him, or it may have been, actually, I think I'm combining Walter Ong with Technopoly.
Yes.
And so I remember Technopoly was kind of talking about all those changes, but each one, our brains changed. Like,
yes,
we were able to remember larger amounts of information specifically accurately prior to, say, the printing press. And then the printing press came, and it was kind of like a balance. You know, you still had to remember a lot because you couldn't take, a lot of stuff, but you had the books and stuff like that. And then, so I do wonder I wonder if, I know we have an age of orality, but I do feel like when you look at people's IQ levels, they're dropping, their ability to, their patience, their ability to like maintain focus. I'm wondering if it's a different type of orality, because because it is still stored on the internet. So it's like, I do wonder if there is like we needed some sort of balance. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm worried that we're going to get to a point where it's like, we're all just, lights, and we can't focus unless we have like on the screen in front of us, we can't accomplish something. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's moving our brains that direction.
Yeah, and that's a big part of like where we're at right now is obviously we're not in a full oral society. Like, you still need like written words. Like, you need to know how to spell your name. You need to know how to like type things on a keyboard. Those are still essential skills to have if you're going to communicate effectively in 2025. But yeah, no, the crazy thing is some of the psychological stuff that Technopoly talks about, like how your brain starts to change with how you're adjusting to that type of communication. Like, you're right. I can't remember if it's Walter Ong or if it was from Technopoly.
It's so similar, yeah.
Yeah, like, they cover a lot of the same things. But he's going through the idea that that a lot of what we're doing, even now, like us talking and things like that through Discord, through video chat and things, he actually still compares it to reading, which was really shocking. But it was the idea that like reading, you were able to learn something, you had your brain engaged, but it was an isolated, solitary activity. You don't need people around you to read. You just need yourself and a book. And he's like, now we're in a hybrid situation where I technically don't need any real people physically around me in this room to get the experience that I'm getting out of Discord. And yet, and I think you did a lot of this in your dissertation preach of like parasocial social presence theory. It's like, but I feel as close to someone as if they're right next to me because of video chat, because of Discord.
Yeah, I can see your facial expression, your hand, like what we're doing right now. We both are 100%. Doing this. And that's similar to what if you're just across the table from me, it still has that same, I may not feel the spittle off of Ply's, mouth that hits me, but otherwise it is a similar experience. God, I had an idea. Keep going. Sorry, I just wanted to agree with you on that. I had another one. Nope.
And I think it's because like our brains have obviously adjusted to the fact to know that like, yeah, that is Ply in the screen, across that I'm sitting from, that's preach and stuff like that. Like you're able to understand the concept of like distance that's being covered, but the activity itself is still, at least for me right now, I'm as isolated in this room as I would be with a book. And yet I'm getting so much more out of this than a book because of the fact that my brain has altered to the point where I can actually like, I can essentially make believe that you guys are all in the room with me, even though you're not physically. And like that weird in between is kind of what Walter Ong's saying, is like eventually we could all be in completely separate rooms with no one around us, and yet feel as though we have all of these people right next to us. That's kind of where he ends the book, is like, what's that going to mean for society eventually, where we're all just alone in rooms, yet somehow more connected than we've ever been, and closer to each other than we would argue in some cases in real life. So that it's that question that he ends in that book that has made me kind of go back to MMORPGs and be like, yeah, so many times if you were to see physically that person playing an MMORPG, they're alone in a room in a headset, and yet to them,
they're with everybody.
They're surrounded by everybody. That it's they've never been more connected or feel more at home than when they log in, and yet physically they are alone. It's a weird thing that has to kind of get balanced as a result of that. But that
I also wonder how, because what you're talking about, I do know that like they've shown that like when you write down notes as opposed to typing them, you remember more of what you're writing. So you'll actually, like, even if a lecturer is lecturing and you're writing it with a pen on paper, more of the information gets stuck in your brain and you'll just remember it just from that one interaction as opposed to typing on it. So I also wonder how we can adapt society as we get more and more technological, as we get, like, I do feel like there needs to be like some adjustments so that we don't lose that element of, how our brain remembers information and it's more easily retained. And it's like, we need to find the balance of like, okay, this is a good technological advancement in these ways, but we also need to kind of pull back a little bit and implement other old school methods that were more beneficial in that way. I think there is like, this is well beyond either one of us. This is
sure.
This is a big sociological, like, massive scale concept, but it's like that is an interesting. At what point in time do we start going as society like, okay, let's really tweak on. Let's not just always push forward with technology, balls to the wall, don't look back, don't question anything. At some point in time, let's find a little bit of a balance to where we get all the benefits from the technology, but we don't get we can like offset some of the negative repercussions. Anyway, I was just thinking of that too. Sorry.
Kind of reminds me of, we're talking about all this, and it's like, kind of reminds me of the Matrix, like where you're saying you're all alone, but you're connected, right? And back to what we were talking about a little bit before about your brain not caring and just thinking it's in with a whole bunch of people. It's like that scene with Cypher when he's in the restaurant with Agent Smith and he's eating the steak.
Yeah.
And he says, this tastes like steak, but this could be chicken. This could taste. I don't care.
Yeah.
Put me back in. Put me back in. I want to be rich. I want to be. And he's like, he doesn't care about the real world, quote unquote. He just, my brain doesn't know the difference. I don't care. Plug me back in. So to Preach's point with, like, we got to be careful and find the median, find the balance there between, because I think that physical connection in the real world, even though I consider this part of the real world, but the physical world, I think still is what human beings need the most, like to touch, to feel, to hug.
Yeah. Well, there are elements like pheromones, even like with romance, right?
Yeah.
Like that enhances like there's only so much
dangerous when I walk out.
You will not get the pheromones that like let you know, oh, this person's kind of interested. And you're like, I don't know why, but I also feel interested in you. And it's
follow
like,
me like alley cats. I get it.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I'm sure they do. But I agree with you. I'm just saying, I think that we can't lose that. We have to find the balance there. But I think it is wonderful that we can have this conversation with Josh here, even though we're all three in different states. We're all from different backgrounds, and we never would have met each other if it wasn't for these online tools and develop these relationships. It does open up perspectives. It does open up to be able to learn from people who are not just in your village, who are not just in your box, but you can go out there in World of Warcraft, right? You can, I'm sure people on different continents of that game act differently.
Oh, yeah.
Right? People who pick mages and people who pick the warriors. I don't know all the classes anymore, but or the guy who does magic and swords at the same time. The what's that one there?
Paladin,
the Paladin.
Dark Knight. Yeah.
I'm sure they're picking those off of personality types, and Paladins want to hang out with other Paladins, just like, Italians want to hang out with other Italians. It's the same, right? Like, all of a sudden, instead of being Italian, you're a Paladin.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you probably witnessed a lot of that, where sorcerers look over at the warriors and go, these guys don't read. They just swing mallets and hit each other and burp and drink ale. And then, right? So...
Yeah, as a diehard Death Knight and Frost Mage, those are gonna be the two things that I always go for.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's definitely communities there of like I know especially classic mages take a little bit of pride in the fact that they are like in many cases like some of the most sought after classes because they get to make food and drinks for everybody that like keep their mana and health high. You obviously get like lots of protection spells and things like that, and then by the end, I mean, mages make some of the most money in Classic WoW just because you're selling portals to other locations to players. Like, oh, where do you need to go? Cool. 5 gold.
Smart.
Handout. Yeah.
I like it.
They're laughing all the way to the bank, man.
Yeah, dude. And it's those behaviors are, I'm sure, so interesting in your dissertation to see how people behave based upon their personality type, based upon, you can start to tell right away how someone's going to be just based off the character class, based off of, what they want their specialty to be, or one wants to be a blacksmith, one wants to be a cook or whatever, because there's jobs in it too, right? There's the jobs and everything too. So I knew who was going to act like what generally once I got to the lay of the land in DC Universe Online. Heroes were different than villains.
Yep.
Different personalities than villains, or you could tell because when you played DCUO, you would pick your mentor. Mm-hmm. So for a hero, you could be Superman. You could pick Superman, Wonder Woman, or Batman, I believe. I think.
Gotcha.
Great. And you could tell based upon who picked Superman, who was, where they were more Boy Scouty. You could tell who picked Batman. They were willing to do whatever it took to play the mission or beat the level. And you know what I mean? So you could see the dichotomy in personalities just based upon, you pick Superman and, you're doing fire powers. Like you started to see, I'm not going to click with somebody who's a water tank. But I will click, or whatever. But I will, or somebody who picked the Joker for their mentor on the villain side.
Gotcha.
This guy's too wild for me. Or he's not going to show up on time for the raids. Or like because he's chaotic and doesn't pay attention, or I'm not saying it was always true, but you could start to see, you know what I mean. So like Preach is I knew playing Preach with Warzone for a little bit. I knew he was a snooty sniper. It came pretty fast that he wanted to hit his shots from 500 yards. And if I
just want to win.
Yeah. So if I drifted off even slightly, off to the side, and then he would always get killed, and I would yell, I'm coming, and I would come try to save him. He'd be mad at me. So I could see his personality type pretty fast.
Sure.
And so I couldn't leave his side. How many times I saved him?
I'm suing. This is not how anything went. I'm let a judge decide.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, let a judge decide.
It was all three of us. There's 4-man teams, and 3 of us would be moving as a unit from place to place. And then Ply is talking to chat, and then so we're going this way, and all of a sudden you just see on the mini map this little dot going off this way, and he's like, "Oh no, guys, don't make me dance. I don't want to dance, oozy woozy." And then we're like, "Ply, we're all getting shot by 12 different teams. Please help." And he's like, "Oh," and so like that's actually how Your Honor. Your Honor, he's the judge. Yeah, Josh is the judge.
Yeah,
Your Honor,
right.
I would like to present my evidence, my counter evidence.
Yeah.
But I mean, how good was the dance?
That's
what
pretty good. He dances pretty good.
The chair dance is unbelievable. I've heard good things about the chair dance because I invented it. But and it's not just specific to MMOs and like we keep going back to Call of Duty because I think those two are like such the opposite sides of the spectrums.
Yeah.
Sure.
But even single player games have built communities and cult followings and connections. Skyrim.
Yeah, Dark Souls is another big one. Yeah.
I'm a Dark Souls champ, by the way.
Well, that's why I was going with the talking about Discord, right? Because
Elden Ring.
games done quickly.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Because now that you got speedrun specialists, who it's literally an old game that is strictly single player, but it's got a huge community. And a lot of interpersonal connections because of the way that so even video games that aren't necessarily even intended to be social have become social because of the way we've adapted various, Discord and other technologies too.
Yeah, if you explored all of that, your dissertation would be 70,000 pages long because it's crazy.
It'd take you 12 years to write. Yeah,
100%.
I don't think from people who look at it from a 30,000-foot view, who have been around since the dawn of the internet or the dawn of, are surprised by the direction that it's taken, though, because I think it's just a natural progression. I mean, back when Star Trek came out, all of a sudden there were Star Trek conventions. And people were, and then people wanted to be around other people who thought they were Trekkies.
Yep.
Like, you just naturally want to be around other people who are interested in the shit that you're interested in.
Sure.
And then they became friends, and they'd go to all the conventions, and then, Star Wars, and then whatever it was. And naturally, as the internet took that virtual, and the gaming industry, thank goodness, by the way, the gaming industry is bigger than Hollywood. I think it's great for everybody. Gaming, and I think the gaming industry might got a little bit too big for its britches, and some AAA studios need to learn a few lessons, and maybe you know what I mean. But the single, it's a lot easier for a smaller video game studio of one. I've seen games that are masterpieces that one guy made in a part time, after work, schlubbing it as a plumber, comes home, he's programming, he takes years, he puts it on Steam, and that game, for what the price was and who worked on it, is better than some of the AAA garbage. So I think the gaming industry can be humbled by the players who are not at that AAA level yet. I think they got to watch out.
Yeah.
And I think that's good for all of us. I think World of Warcraft is a better game, and they have to put more effort into it to keep it. They learned their lesson. They went better than anybody. They're dipping down. They're coming out with pandas. They're coming out with this, that, the other thing. Here comes the player base. Here comes the communities as a whole. They come together and say, what are you doing to our shit?
Yep.
And then all of a sudden the vanilla pops up. They give them what they want.
Yep.
And then I think you, as a whole, you can talk about World of Warcraft community as a whole. And then you can, like you said, you can break it down to the Death Knight. You can break it down to the main. You can break it all the way down to the guys who like to do barbecue chicken on the grill in one of the villages and hand it out to everybody.
Yep.
Like, there's literally a niche group within. It's like
for everything.
It's like, you know what I mean. It's like Jesus, Catholic Church, Protestant Church.
Yeah.
And the Catholic and Catholic. Then there's Protestant. There's
Yeah.
Like, then you get all the way down to Episcopalians or whatever. But it's like a giant tree.
Oh yeah.
And it's crazy. I think it's a beautiful,
They're Catholics
beautiful
anyway.
thing.
I'm just playing.
No, but I'm just saying.
I just wanted to make a religious joke. Go ahead.
Like the sex, the SECTS sex.
Yes.
Of just to clarify, chat. Because my chat heard a different word. I promise you that. But so the sex inside World of Warcraft must be so fascinating to just. To see, you probably have seen weddings.
Oh yeah.
Like divorces,
weddings, funerals.
It's
a crazy thing.
New kid being born. Oh, my son was born yesterday, guys. Let's do this certain raid and name this character after my new son.
Oh yeah.
It doesn't even Robin Williams have a statue.
For a while, I think
he had a statue in World of Warcraft.
I'm pretty sure, yeah. And I know Chuck Norris for a while was a character in World of Warcraft too.
Ronda Rousey.
Yeah, Ronda Rousey was a big
Ozzy
one.
Osbourne.
Vin Diesel played it for a while too.
And Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah,
they had the Leroy Jenkins achievement. I remember that for a while. That's
they brought
programmed him in.
the actual Leroy Jenkins in to voice that character again, which
that's
is great.
so cool, man. That's stuff that doesn't happen necessarily in Hollywood. It can't.
No.
You don't have
it's a
viewer
product.
who has it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it can a little bit, like fan fiction, conventions, like those things are cool.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have the communities and the relationships have such freedom to create whatever they want within these environments that the stuff that comes out of it, and I know the developers see it and they use it too, like you just said. Let's bring back Leroy. Let's make this dude a voice. Let's put a statue over. They see it and hear it, and they can change the product. If they're smart and they're listening to you guys, they can change the product and give you what you want and aim it towards building those connections and keeping it fostering like a garden. You know, you want to keep it growing. And I think Activision had to learn their lesson.
Yep.
And you know what I mean? Because it took a dip for a while. It never was dethroned. Correct me if I'm wrong. It was never dethroned as the number one, but it was beat up for a while.
It right? took quite a few hits for a while, yeah. Until
it's still number one,
Blizzard,
right?
Of MMO.
I think so.
MMO.
For World of Warcraft, yeah.
I mean, subscribers, players, it's still number one. God,
imagine if Final Fantasy for a while.
14?
I think Final Fantasy 14 came on top for a little bit, and that caused him to sweat because I think until Final Fantasy 14, everybody claimed to be a WoW killer, and then they would get they'd be kind of flash in the hand. Yeah,
Halo, and I think that's actually why Final Fantasy did well, is they didn't try to be a WoW killer. They just tried to do their thing.
They did
and
their
then
own
people
thing.
liked their thing. They weren't like, oh, we're like them, but better. You know, it's like they just said, we're going to do our own thing and create our own product.
Final Fantasy 14 is badass.
Yeah, I actually like it. Yeah, I've played it. Yeah.
I played it,
And it's right there, I think, Preach, that you hit on, like, basically, like, the core of, like, uses and gratifications all over again, because, if your goal is to get a WoW experience in a game outside of WoW, it may not actually check that off. If a game just tries to capture lightning in a bottle, exactly how somebody else did it, it's always going to be an uphill struggle from that. Whereas if you just go, you know what, it's going to be the same genre of game, but we're going to do it the Final Fantasy way. And if you want to scratch that itch of more like, whatever it is, maybe you're more of a role player and you like to kind of like get into your character and like talk like your character or something like that, then that might actually decide, make you choose between one of those two things versus like a more standard across the board, solid quality, 20 years old, established title. You might try something new and go, like Final Fantasy is great for that reason. I know one of the biggest reasons that Final Fantasy is a little bit more popular than WoW is because of like the narrative drive of it. Like the story alone, it feels like a single player game, but you get to bring your friends along with you. Whereas, WoW's a little bit more cut and dry. Like, here's a quest and, you can do all the quests or you can do 3 of the quests, and you can leave gaps out of it, whereas Final Fantasy kind of takes you on this whole story from start to finish.
Sweeping adventure.
Yes, and
Well, I was going to say, guys, Joshua, when is your dissertation going to be? What's the timeline? Or when do you think? We're not going to hold you to it. I just want to get some final thoughts in here because we'd love to have you back on when you finish it. We want to have you back on to hear, how it went, because we want you to do good and get it done. And B, what is your final results of all your research on these connections? We want the update. You know what I mean? 'Cause we got to hear about Preach's dissertation every 3 minutes on this show. So we want to see. Preach needs some competition around here for a dissertation.
I enjoy it,
and I can be the judge around here. So for once, when are you thinking of finishing it? Not holding you to it. What's the timeline? And just some final thoughts from you guys before we wrap it up.
Yeah. So right now I've passed kind of the first big milestone, which is the proposal defense, which is basically me pitching this idea to some of the doctors at the university, and they basically give me the okay. They then give me a massive to-do list of basically rewriting everything or tweaking it or reorganizing it and fixing the wording, etc. And then it goes into the institution review board for approval, and that's a lot of like crossing your T's, dotting your I's, showing that you're doing everything above board, and you justify, this is how I'm going to collect the data, this is what I plan on doing it in a certain way. Once I get that approval, then they let me go collect the data, which for me is going to be a lot of interviews, a lot of interviews. And once I've interviewed enough,
Yeah.
that could be finished over the summer. It could be a year.
You know what,
It's a
too?
lengthy process because you're not just doing interviews.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You also have to write down and record and
Yes.
choose the parts that you
And
they,
code
so
it
they want to
and everything.
codify it so that you can process it. Yeah, it's a lot.
Couple
Yeah.
ideas
So-
for you. Go after someone from Activision. See if you can nail down. No, see if you can nail down a someone who runs the Discord, a community manager for World of Warcraft. I'm sure someone's willing to talk to you. They love that kind of stuff. You got to find the right person. And just go after someone from Activision and say, look, I'm doing this because WoW players are so dedicated to each other. There's such good social connections. You might nail down a big interview there.
Yeah.
Probably not from, the Bobby at the top, that weird guy, but down in Blizzard, you can find one, and
I
that
just promise him some strippers. I'm sure he'll do.
I
that.
mean, hey,
and two, and I'm sure you've probably done this already, so I'm just throwing it out there to the audience too. Probably time to jump into some World of Warcraft streams.
Oh yeah.
On right, I'm sure on Twitch, on Kick, on YouTube, wherever it is. Find a few that, you're going to see the social connection right in your face.
For sure.
Right there, because they're going to talk languages I don't understand in that chat completely, and you're going to understand it, and you're going to see the love flowing back and everything.
Yeah,
So,
and that's one of the things I'd like to do. That is kind of one of the things though that has to get approved by the review board, because a lot of times like Discords and especially guilds are like closed groups. They're kind of private groups and things like that. So there's a lot of like ethics and legal things you have to do.
You let me know. I'll take a few phone calls. I'll see what's going on. I'll call if people owe me some favors. All right.
Okay.
All right.
Good.
And even if you came to me on my daughter's wedding. I was still, you know what I mean? Because you've been a friend.
Got you.
So, but I think those, especially the streams, you're going to find someone in one of those streams. And,
sure.
and it gets you in. And go ahead.
But that is a big, that is one reason that my research went into, what was the content analysis, is because streams are public forums and they're publicly available, so you don't have to get approval from anybody to use them. It's the same as if somebody had like a street sign out, or somebody's walking down the street yelling at people, or whatever, like a concert that's publicly available.
A retail store. Like,
you can. That's actually how I got around, because we were like, it would take. We didn't want to wait 6 months, because sometimes it'll take 6 months to get IRB to give you an approval, and you're just sitting there doing nothing, waiting for them to agree to let you do your thing. And so we just like, you know what? That's actually, I'm loving that you're doing uses and gratification, because that's really one of the primary reasons I didn't include it, was because we were like, I would have to do interviews.
Yeah.
And we were like, we can do other things. We were like, let's just, we'll let somebody else handle that. and along he came.
And here I am.
Well, speaking of interviews, Joshua, it was an absolute honor to have you on today.
Absolutely.
It's an interesting topic. It's something I don't know much about professionally. However, personally, I can feel what you're saying because I've been through some of these things, so I'm relating to it as you're talking to it. We'd love to have you back on again. As soon as you get, even if it's not done yet, but you made some significant progress and you want to come on and share with the dozens and dozens of people who watch this show. If you want to come on and share your results with them and see where it's heading to. And then as we go down, if you need anything from Preach and I to talk to the board or whatever on because you can interview. Preach played a lot of WoW. He plays a lot of Final Fantasy. He's got the MMO experience, too. And
that's true.
And so if you need us for anything, let us know too. Preach, any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
Not really, other than I really did enjoy having this conversation, and you got to come back, because I do.
Yeah, of course.
I actually just shared. That's what I was doing, is I was putting a thing in our Discord chat. That's a really good. I was gonna look into it, but it was a really good source that I found that like it's an academic source, and you may be able to use it, may not, I don't know, but it was really interesting. He broke down, I just found it the other day while I was doing research for my other podcast. I didn't get to use it. It's frustrating me, but it's so cool. He talks about it goes into the uses and gratification, but it talks about like very specific, like the motivations, which is cognitive, affective, personal, integrative, social, integrative, intentionally, and then he just shows how like the different content types lead to come from certain motivations, and then those lead to certain support behaviors. Anyway, I'll connect it to you. But anyway, I would love to, yes, please come back. That's what I guess what I'm getting to, because this gets me excited. I love this kind of.
Oh yeah, no, I had a blast talking about it. I'd love to be back on, and I'll definitely keep you guys updated next time.
Sounds great, brother.
Everybody who listened to this show, make sure you guys hit that follow button on Spotify, Apple, iTunes, Amazon Music, wherever you listen to Ply and the Professor. Joshua, thanks again, dude. I'm out of here. I need to make a sandwich. I'm dying. Preach. Congratulations for not having to take a shit for an hour. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. We'll see you on the next Ply and the Professor. Goodbye. Bye.